So I've got a few Super Puzzle Script updates to show, which I'm going to attempt to do by example. You'll see I have this example game over here. It's very boring. It's just, basic CircuitPython rules. There's 6 boxes that I push onto the targets and it solves the level. So just to immediately demonstrate what I've done, let's go to here where I've got my sprite map. Notice I haven't defined the objects in here. This object section of my code just has like this bit of nunchuck stuff, which I'll explain soon. But I've got my sprite map here. Let's change my player's trousers to red, and then maybe also change this the crate to a nice purple color. And this is just, I'm using GIMP here, but you can use whatever image editor you like. I'm going to export this. Oh, look, my game restarted. Oh my gosh, everything's updated automatically. I didn't have to do anything. That was amazing. So yeah, so I now have it so that I can edit my sprites in a PNG. I just draw them in a PNG like a normal sprite map, and it automatically reloads the game. So the other part to this, though, if you check this folder I've got over here called example, the rest of these directories don't matter. They're just part of the tooling that I'm working on. So this example directory is everything that's needed for the game. So alongside the actual puzzle script code, which you can see here, which is in this main.ps.njk file, there's this there's these 2 files. There's the sprite-map.png, which is this file down here, saved as a PNG, and then there is this object-map.yaml. And I've shown this briefly before, but things have changed quite a lot, so I'm going to show it again. But this is what defines basically how to take the sprites that are in this sprite map and turn them into objects. So the object map takes sprites from the sprite map, turns into objects. Makes sense, huh? Basically, at the top of your object map, you say what sprite map to use. So you could potentially have multiple object maps with multiple sprite maps if you wanted to. And then you list your objects. You say, so the background object is going to have its sprite taken from position x0, y0 from the sprite map. So that's the top left corner. The wall gets from x1, y0. So that's 1 in from the left, 0 down from the top. And that's the wall sprite. So that makes sense. Of course, if I were to just swap things around here, if I really wanted to, let's change the background and the wall over. And then I save this file. It also just automatically reloads the game. And I hit start, and now the background's the wall, and the wall is the grass. Yep, looks very odd. Anyway, so that's cool. So I can edit either the sprite map itself or the object map, and it will automatically update. Let me fix that. That looks terrifying. And so the cool thing with this is that this isn't just like a basic list of sprites to grab from here as well. This actually also supports doing all sorts of manipulations of those sprites. So I'm going to attempt to show that. So a recent one I added is, so basically each object, so under objects, there's a bunch of object names, right? And then when it gets to a list, which is indicated by a hyphen in YAML, once you get to a list, the list is a sequence of steps to run to generate the actual object sprite, like the actual pixels for the object. In this case, each of these just has a single step, which is to load the sprite from the sprite map. But I could add an additional step to the crate object, which says, I'm going to do a color transform. The way color transform works is you have a further list below that saying what set of transforms you want to do. So I'm going to have one transform which does nothing to the hue. It's going to change the sprite. It's not going to change the sprite at all. And then I'm going to add 2 more. The second one is going to shift the hue by 70 degrees around the color wheel. And then the next one is going to shift it by 140 degrees. So in this case, what I'm going to get is actually 3 objects. The 3 objects will have different names. They'll be crate 0, crate 1, and crate 2. Each with a different hue as shifted by this color transform step. So if I save that, it's not going to work, right? My game is not going to load. And the reason why is because over here in this file, I need to, like, I can't just add a crate to the level now because I need to add individual items to the legend for each kind of crate. So let me go and update that. Whoops, 2, 1, 2, and then I'm going to go and throw them into the level. Let's do it like this. 0, 1, 2. Okay, then my game loads, and in theory, yay, I have wonderfully hue shifted boxes that work just the same as before. And the crazy thing there is I didn't change any of the rules or anything. So how does that work? How does it know what crate is in the collision layer? Or what's it, or in the sounds thing, like when a crate moves? Because I don't have a crate object anymore, right? But so the way this works is not only do I generate the objects, but I also generate groups of objects. So any objects like generated by this set of steps will end up being under the crate group. So I guess I should show what this stuff does now. So at the very top of the file, what I do is I say require my object map.yaml as object map. And this will, it doesn't just load the YAML file, it actually goes and processes that YAML file to generate the actual objects and groups. So this object map object, when I say object here, I mean the JavaScript object. This object map object has 2 properties, objects and groups. So in the object section of my file, I can say for object in objects, and I do object.format. And what this object.format does, this format method, is it spits out the actual like puzzle script code for each of the objects. And then down here, I have a similar thing under the legend where I say for every group in groups, I'm going to format the group, which ends up writing out a thing like, group name equals member1 or member2, that kind of thing. So here, what this will be doing automatically, because of the way I've defined it in my object map, is it'll be saying crate equals crate 0 or crate 1 or crate 2. But that's happening without me having to do anything. And that obviously, because that group exists, I can use it in any of these places down here. So all this stuff still works. So to give another example of something I could do, I actually support loads of different kinds of steps here, and I want to keep adding more. Like right now, I don't actually support rotations, which I think would be really handy. Like if I could say rotate an object, like in each of the 4 directions, so you can have an up, right, down, and left facing sprite or object. I don't support that, but I do support having a left and right. So far I support like a horizontal flip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the player and kind of cut that part of the player out and try and make them like a right-facing. I hate this program. Make them a right-facing player. Sure, that looks good enough. So right now, if I just save this, okay, my player sprite now looks like that. What I'm going to do is, so quite a common way of doing this thing. So what I want is basically if the last direction I moved with the player was left, I want a left-facing sprite. If it was right, then I want a right-facing sprite. And I want to do it without having to draw it twice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a render group here with a subgroup of player, which is going to take the sprite from, it's the player sprite, so take that. And then the next step is going to be flip true. So notice here I can have subgroups as well. I don't think in this example there's really going to be an actual use for having this subgroup, but this will ultimately end up generating, render equals render player and render player equals render player right or render player left, right? So this is going to end up generating groups for each layer of that structure. And I actually support all sorts of crazy stuff. Should I go into it? I guess I can just briefly mention it. So like, let's say I did have another render thing here, like render crate. Let's say I was going to do some kind of complicated rendering for the crate, and I had a bunch of rules. But let's say I also wanted to do a step that was in common between these two. What I can do then is I can have a pre thing here where I can list steps that will apply to everything in this group. And I've ended up using this a lot in my pipe game that I'm working on, because I have a pretty complex object setup to do like the pseudo 3D effects and things. Anyway, so render player, and then I'm going to make player itself just a transparent object, which to do, I basically need no steps. To represent that, I just put an empty array and there are no steps here. So now I have player, which is just transparent, and then because of the flip true here, I'm going to have two render players. There'll be render player right and render player left. Okay. Funnily enough, the game still runs. Obviously, I can't see anything though. My player's there because I'm not actually doing the rendering. So, what I'm also going to need to be able to make this work. Is this true? Could I do this without a marker? Do I need a transparent marker? I don't need a transparent marker, do I? I could just do this with the render thing. Let's just do it with the render thing then. Maybe? Is this a bad idea? Okay, whatever. I'm just going to try it. What do I need to do? I need to draw. In fact, I'm going to do it with the marker because I already tried it with the marker before. So I'm also going to add two marker sprites, which are also going to be transparent. So there's going to be a marker right and a marker left. Okay, and what I'm going to do is when the player moves left or right, I'm going to put a marker right, left or right over the top of them, and then in the late step of the rules, I'm going to add the render image or the render object. So I'm going to need to add stuff. What am I going to need to do? I need to first add both the render stuff and the marker stuff to here. So let's go and add marker and render, and because those groups are automatically made, this will just work, even though those actually contain multiple things. And then we're going to need to add some rules. So what do I want? I want, when moving vertical, if there's a player and the player has a marker on them already, let's get the marker to follow. Oh, marker. And if we're moving left and the player's moving, then I want to actually change the marker to be a... This is what I want? This is what I want. I want to add a marker left specifically, and then right. Okay, so here's an example where I could use a loop. It's a bit of a silly place to use a loop because it's just going to add a line really, but whatever. For direction in, although it's not silly in the sense that like I'm deduplicating a line. So if I ever change the logic for the line, I want the logic to be the same for every direction. And so if I did write it out multiple times, I would have to modify it in multiple places if I need to change the logic. Anyway, so I can do for left, right, let's do dir, and then dir over here as well. Cool. And then let's have a late step that goes where there's a, what do I want? I want where there's a player with a marker left. Let's add a render player left. In fact, I'm going to need a right one as well, so let's throw this in that loop. In fact, this is making this more reasonable. There we go. Change all those to does. And a space there, just so everything's consistent. This is not going to be right at all. Okay, actually, it's not bad. I just need to clear the render. So, obviously, because the render group just exists, I can just do render, clear the rendering at the start. Okay, cool. Run rules on level start. I am doing that. Oh, okay. I just need to add in a marker on the player at the beginning. And marker right. So we'll be right facing to begin with. Okay, cool. Woo. So yeah, basically that's it. And of course, if I just change something about, you know, if I scribble all over the player, and then oh, and then exports, my game just updates, and oh my gosh, I'm some kind of crazy monster. Nice. So yeah, as I was saying, I actually support loads more different transformations. There's flipping, there's color transformations. There is a thing that I've called extend, where I found it useful for basically my 3D-ish objects where there's like a top layer to them that I need to draw above. So I can say extend this object in the, like, by taking the sprite that's one position above the sprite in the sprite map. Don't know if that makes any sense. And then it generates another object with the name top, like added to the end. And as I said, I can do the whole pre thing. I haven't actually added post, but I'm gonna support doing post rules as well. Oh, of course. Okay, so the cool thing about me nesting player under render is that if I did ever add another render thing, my rule for clearing all of the render stuff at the beginning would still work without me changing anything. I also support, if I wanted specifically, what's a good example? Yeah, sure. If I wanted an object specifically called render, not render something, then I can put a dot here and put steps under this, and then the dot basically is treated as like no addition to the name of the object. So if I list a bunch of steps here, what they'll do is generate a render with those steps. And any pre's on here will apply to all of these. But that actually gives you a mechanism for doing more interesting stuff with pre as well, where let's say you have let's say, I'm just going to clear this and put some gibberish in there. Let's say we've got a few things. And maybe for 3 of them, I want there to be a certain pre-step, and for the other 2, I don't. Then I can do, but I don't want to add an extra element to the name of the object. So in that case, I can do a dot, nest these 3 under it, and say pre whatever my pre-steps are. And then if I want different things for here, I can do the same, do pre and whatever my pre-steps are. Except this won't work like this because you can't have duplicate keys in YAML. So you just have to add I always just add AB or whatever. Well, I guess you could give them a descriptive thing if there's a more descriptive way of describing this pre and this pre. But anyway, it supports doing that. I'm pretty happy because like before, the way you specified objects, you would have to, like, it wasn't a list of steps, so there was no ordering to them. There was just the ordering that I'd like hard-coded into how I was producing the objects, whereas now it's all ordered. So if you want to do kind of complex stuff, you can, where you like, maybe you would rotate, then you would flip, or what else do I support other than rotating and flipping? What do I support? Quite a few things that I've just completely forgotten. Generating sequences. So I can say, I want to make a sequence of walls. I want 5 different walls, and then you can specify what's going to change along that sequence. So you could say, so during that sequence, I want to offset x by 1 each time, right? And that's going to add 1 to x for each of the sprites. So you end up with 5 different walls from a different position. I also implemented a thing that was useful for me, which is called transition grid, I think. In fact, I can just find my example for my pipe game. Why don't I just do that? Object map. So transition grid, I've used it here. So basically in my, let me open it, I guess. Open recent. That one? Yep. I'm gonna have to zoom in a lot so it's visible. So in my pipe sprite map, you see here, I've got like a grid of my player. And so along the diagonal here is the up, right, down, and left facing sprites for my player. And then the ones off the diagonal are the transition between the 2 states. So this is the up to right transition. And so that's what I'm saying here. I'm saying along the diagonal, we've got up, right, down, and left. The stride is, how to describe the stride? Well, each of these sprites is actually 2 high. So what I'm saying is when jumping to the next one, jump 2 on the y-axis and 1 on the x-axis. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of crazy stuff going on here. Should I run this? Well, let's run it. Let's jump to that directory and do simple puzzle script run. And I guess this will be a good demonstration of the value of this. So that built my game. It takes a little bit longer to start on the first time. So obviously this is not like a proper level. This is just what I'm testing with. Isn't that fun? What was I going to show? So obviously all the objects in this game are generated by this object.yaml. And then my actual puzzle script file is only like, it's like 250 lines or so. Although I've extracted the levels out into a separate file as well. There's quite a lot of rules here, but the cool thing is like my objects are not in here anymore. They're just generated from that PNG file. And to give you a demonstration of the value of this, so this file was like 250, basically 250 plus like maybe 100 and something for the things. I should make a better way for me to grab this, the output, but this is the one I'm selecting right now is the outputs from like generating my puzzle script code. So if I keep going, if I go past all the objects that were generated, oh dear, there's a lot. I need to not go too far as well. Whoa, I went a little bit too far. Here it is. Here's where it starts. So let's copy all that, paste it into a file. That is 1,600 lines long. So from like maybe 200 and like maybe 400 lines, I end up with something 1,600 lines long. So that's a 4 times saving, right? Pretty good. Anyway, as always, this is not quite ready yet. However, I think this is everything I wanted to get done before like tidying it up and publishing it as a real thing that other people can use. So hopefully my next update will be about actually being able to use this. So yeah, hope that looks cool. See you for the next one.